Thank you, Nate. We are so pleased to have our colleague and a distinguished scientist and engineering scholar. Actually, he's a scientist. They are physicists by training, right? Yes. Dr. Anthony Caruso. His accomplishments are too many to list in a limited time, but he's a Curators Professor, Distinguished Professor, and holds all kind of important positions. And among his key role, he is heading the MIDE, and I don't want to give you the full name of his acronym. He will tell you all about it. It's the Missouri Institute for Defense and Energy. All right. So without much ado, I will turn it over to Tim, of course, for critical materials, Crossroads, energy materials ecosystem. Many of us are unaware of that. The name also doesn't mean what it is, critical material. I'm sure he'll explain everything. We'll learn a lot.
So happy to stop throughout and discuss any questions. I assume we have a varied audience in terms of your disciplines that you came from, and this is all at a very exciting time within the new administration and the changes that we're seeing. So
You made a different interesting things.
I started out studying electronic structure and magnetism and beating my head against the wall trying to get money from the NSF, and that was working okay, but the return on investment was really poor. And so I started to get into the defense area, and we were building neutron detectors, and we started to build high-power microwave devices to take out drones, and the money was very easy compared to going to the NSF. And I think we fell into this trap of the easy solution, the easy button, which the administration definitely enjoys to see as well. But it allowed us to start to do classified work here at UMKC. It started to build up a portfolio of more applied work that we hadn't done in the past. And then I kind of became disenchanted and decided that instead of making widgets for the warfighter that are going to sit on the shelf, we needed to have more impact on the taxpayer. We really needed to do something that was going to hit home in the city and in the region, much more so than just developing these widgets and making Raytheon richer. So we started looking at urban agriculture and trying to use physics to establish new ways in which we could make urban agriculture affordable. And so imagine that you could have a Costco-sized warehouse that would supply food for maybe a 1.5 mile radius in Kansas City. And you had 16 of these around the urban core. And that the individuals from those neighborhoods or communities were operating those Costco-sized warehouses. Would that be a sustainable model to change the type 2 diabetes and the coronary heart disease that's coming out of those neighborhoods? Would it change the way that they're feeling and the way that their education changes? And I just could not find a way to make it work from a money and funding point of view. And so we started to switch over to look at microelectronics and how the microelectronics sector was dominated by the East Asians. So the Japanese, South Koreans, Taiwanese, and Chinese really dominated 88% of all of the microelectronics fabrication in the world. And it was creating this leverage or control over the United States and national security. But we didn't have the intellectual capacity here to be able to dominate or compete with what's happening in upstate New York today, or in Florida, or in Silicon Valley. And so I tried to look at what's something that we can really impact from this region that will have taxpayer impact as well, and be able to bring in a lot of money. And that really was going upstream of the supply chain and not looking at the sexy devices that needed to be built, but rather the materials that go into those devices. And so that's how we kind of came to this here today and formed the Critical Materials Crossroads as a formal institute that exists under UMKC today and has 150 partners, about 300 people that engage in this work. And this is, I've tried to be as bi-state, bipartisan, bicameral as possible in attacking all of these measures. So despite getting pressure to be selfish and only work on UMKC efforts, I continue to pull in Lincoln University, MU, S&T, UMSL, CMO, and all of the large Kansas universities. Of the Critical Materials Crossroads energy materials ecosystem is to produce midstream energy materials for autonomy and sovereignty over U.S. critical goods manufacturing. So midstream energy materials are really the refined materials. So it's not the material you're pulling out of the ground, it's not the raw ore, and it's not the finished good. It's the midstream part that you need to put into a device. So if you take this remote, there's a lot of plastic here, but there's also a lot of copper, and there's tantalum, and there's maybe cobalt that exists inside of this device. And that has to come from somewhere and be refined, and that is 90% coming from the Chinese today, and the other 10% is coming from other foreign nations. We just do not refine material in the United States any longer. And then to be a peer leader in the U.S. energy materials manufacturing capacity by 2035. So that's for the greater Kansas City region to be able to meet that need. So we have an expectation as a developed and industrialized nation for convenience and control. And that means that if you place an order on Amazon, you expect that that's going to arrive in 2 days. And if you want to go to New York tomorrow, you expect that you can buy a ticket, get on a plane, and be able to do that. But in order to be able to do these things and to be able to deter foreign adversaries from entering our country, to be able to pay high relative wages and be environmentally responsible and have a high occupational standard, in order to do all these things, we need to have critical goods. And critical goods are simple transportation to amoxicillin, to the jet engines that are on an airplane, to vaccines for yellow fever, to chips for AI, to locomotives, to MRI machines, to being able to crack oil for fuel. And in order to have these critical goods, we need critical components. These critical components could be the electric motors, or the heat exchangers, or the catalytic converters, or the displays, or the turbine engine fan blades, or the battery packs. And in order to have these components, we need to have the materials. And so a locomotive, which is a traction-based system, has this permanent magnet synchronous motor. And this permanent magnet synchronous motor has to have permanent magnets. And these permanent magnets that are on this rotor are coming from neodymium, iron, boron, praseodymium, dysprosium, terbium. We need all that stuff in order to be able to make those permanent magnets, and we don't have a replacement for those permanent magnets today. That's a problem that's been worked for at least 40 years without a solution. And that's a fundamental physical limitation of these elements, that they provide a high magnetic moment at high temperature that you just don't see from transition metals, as an example. Or if we want to have fan blades to go into this jet, then we need to be able to pull out nickel and chromium and niobium and molybdenum and titanium and aluminum to make this alloy of Inconel and then the part itself. So that has to come from somewhere, and we just don't think about that all the time, where these are coming from, and so on for heat exchangers and battery packs. And so these critical materials are really based on these critical intermediates. And the intermediates are oxides of nickel or metallic nickel. cobalt sulfate, nickel sulfate, iron oxide, neodymium oxide, and so on. Somebody has to make these high purity materials. And there's a demand, there's a market for that, and that supply has been coming from foreign sources. Yes, sir.
What about recycling the ones that are already used
Absolutely.
instead of getting new ones?
So for electronic waste itself, there was $57 billion worth of copper, gold, platinum, palladium, silver that was put into landfills in 2023. Okay, and this is what the famous book is based on, and how he's made a career in looking at waste. And we can't survive without starting to recover and recycle material. You're absolutely right, and we need to find a way to now create policy that will make that happen. So right now, we recycle or we recover 15% of the material. So when you're done with your phone, or you're done with your dishwasher, or you're done with your microwave, do you take it to a disposal site that they will recover electronics, or do you chuck it in the trash? You know, lots of people don't want to deal with having to take it through to the electronics recycling center. And so we need to have a different way that we can be able to recover the metals from these devices. It makes it really convenient for everybody to do it.
Are there recycling centers for that in this area?
There are. So the Midwest Recycling Center here in Kansas City is one of the biggest ones.
Okay.
And there are a couple others in St. Louis.
I have a smart TV that cracked out this week.
Yeah.
So, yep. Okay.
Yep. And you know, how can you compile it together? You know, maybe you put a bunch of stuff in your garage and then you get rid of it all at once, so it's easier.
According to what I heard, President Trump is trying to get the rare land in Ukraine, and in order to get this kind of mineral. Now, but what I heard is that there are not so many. So I don't know if it's really a good step to get inside this kind of land, or it's just a dream.
So, in order to be able to get nickel, for example, from Ukraine, you need to have an active mine, and you need to have the transportation infrastructure that allows you to extract and then get that material out. And to do it in an economically feasible way, you want to be able to concentrate the material on site. So there's a lot of crap rock that comes with that, a lot of waste, right? So it may only be 1 or 2% nickel.
Oh.
And you want to be able to very quickly and efficiently get rid of the other 98%, or at least the other 70%, and just come forward with a concentrate. And so between the war in Ukraine, that has stopped all mining operations, and most of their mining operations aren't in an easily accessible place. So it's not like the United States where we have the rail infrastructure or the barge infrastructure where we can move material quickly. So it's a nice thought by Trump that that's a way that we can recover the funds that we've provided through bombs and people and food, but it's not very realistic or very economically feasible to do that. Greenland is the next best right now, and that may have economic feasibility. It's a little bit better and a little bit easier to access than trying to go to the Ukraine. Canada is full of, yeah, go ahead.
Can I just add on to what you were saying, just to elaborate on these points,
Yep.
both gentlemen? When we talk about the waste, solid waste, for example, intuitively, most of us will think about the garbage and the other kind of what we call municipal solid waste. But the word solid waste, which is the biggest portion of all the waste that is generated world over, especially in the United States and advanced country, you also have electronic waste, and then nuclear waste and hazardous waste, and so on and so forth, food waste. But solid waste, and Tony touched on that, when you start a mining operation, the bulk of the waste is just unusable at that time, solid waste. And the term solid waste includes that, all those mining waste. And a lot of stuff are mined from ground, like limestone, other things to make various products. So we have to keep in mind the fact that the mining operation is one of the largest producers of not only hazardous waste but also solid waste. A lot more than what you and I contribute in our garbage and other places every day.
So we get the material from the ground, and we call that a primary source, or we can recover it, and we call that a secondary source. And alkaline batteries are actually a really good source of manganese and zinc. And right now there are recycling operations in Rolla, Missouri, where they're separating and recovering the manganese and zinc and selling that to farmers for fertilizer. And we want to be able to stand up these operations here in Kansas City as well to make electrolytic manganese dioxide, which can go into additional higher value markets. So we start from some sort of raw mineral and then concentrate that mineral. And then that concentrated mineral turns into a purified material. So this purified material might be at 99.9%. And then you make some sort of alloy or complex with that refined material. That refined material is then able to go into a subcomponent, the component, and then finally the good. These 4 segments upstream are the most vulnerable today. Those are the ones that have the highest risk, and also the highest economic importance for the United States.
Risk in what sense?
So a risk that we would not, if a foreign entity decided they wanted to cut us off from those materials, then we're toast. And then it also increases the price so that, or at least the price control is dominated by someone outside of the system. If you want to vertically integrate and try to have all the steps together, then you can control price a little bit better. And I'll show a couple graphs on how the nickel prices in particular have been all over the place. So we can do the same thing with nickel and how that goes into a cylindrical battery. It goes into a battery pack that then goes into UAVs, for example. So we know that the Chinese dominate in the material processing and refining process. But what's really little known is that the Chinese actually own 72% of the nickel that's coming out of Indonesia, or 80% of the cobalt that's coming out of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. China imports the most amount of manganese in the world, and China is also the primary exporter of smelted lead. So what's the state mineral for Missouri?
Galena.
Galena, it's lead sulfide. Okay? So Missouri has been a leader in lead production for a long time. And in 2013, the Herculaneum smelter in Herculaneum, Missouri on the Mississippi, south of St. Louis, was shut down by the EPA. And when that happened, we destroyed the circular supply chain that we had in Missouri, where we were smelting lead sulfide to create purified lead and lead oxide for batteries that were going into submarines. The Intersys Corporation specifically makes those batteries. So today, that lead sulfide is pulled out of the ground by the Doe Run Company, sent over to China for smelting, and then sent back to us to be put into our submarine batteries. So that not only creates a national security risk, but also destroys part of the economy of Missouri by not being able to recover that material.
Tony,
Yeah.
if this is such a critical metal, as you just described, why is it that United States military or even the Department of Energy do something about it? I don't understand. Why do they have to send the raw materials to China for extraction and purification
So there's-
instead of actually doing it in the United States?
So there's two different solutions that are being pursued right now. The first is because we know we're no longer going to smelt lead, right? Because smelting lead means that you're going to have lead vapor that's going to get outside and it's going to hurt people, and that's why the EPA shut that down. So now instead of having a pyrometallurgical operation at high temperature, which is volatilizing lead, we're developing a hydrometallurgical technique that can remove the sulfur and purify the lead. And it's taken 10 years now to be able to get to the point where the Doe Run Company can now begin to have a pilot process for lead sulfide purification from hydrometallurgical operations that will be permitted and allowable within Missouri. So that's solution number one. Solution number two is to replace the lead acid batteries completely with nickel zinc batteries. And the Acer Corporation out of Joplin, Missouri is doing just that. They are building nickel zinc batteries that will eventually displace the lead acid that are on submarines today, both for the toxicity of the lead and for making sure we have a secure supply chain within the United States that can meet that need. So you're absolutely right that something drastic needed to happen, and that's what's happening today.
Especially with all the money that is poured into the military, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marine, everything. I would have thought by now that this is a settled matter.
What's amazing is it's so slow. But it takes us 10 years in order to be able to convert over to this new system. Mm-hmm. And that's showing a weakness of our system as well in being unable to pivot quickly to these new technologies.
And the other thing, as we're just talking, the morality of saying, you can't do lead smelting in the United States because of the vapor of the lead, but this is allowed, or even if it is mined in the United States, it's sent to other countries. What are the morality of those people being also exposed?
It's terrible. It's absolutely terrible that we allow. We're pushing. We're living fat and happy in the United States, right? And we're allowing other countries to do the crap work, the toxic work, the hard work, so that we can live to be fat and happy. You're absolutely right. So the ethical part of that is terrible, and it's blind to us. We don't see what's happening, and we just ignore it, right? Unless we have these discussions and we actually do something about it. So it's at the end of the day, it's selfishness. We are selfish, and we want to live at a higher standard. We want to live in this first world industrialized nation, and we want to allow others to do the hard work so that we can live in this place. That's the hard reality of this. And I don't say that very often in public. But
Yes.
that's exactly the situation.
You're absolutely right. I mean, you have hit the nail on the coffin. Look at what is happening now. When you are looking around the neighborhood, who are the people who are climbing on the roof at 100-degree temperature and changing your roof? Who are the people who are managing your lawn? They're all Mexican. Majority of them are Hispanic, Mexican. We don't want to do the hard work ourselves. How many American, either regardless of the color, white or black people, are doing that kind of work anymore? Nobody. So that is the reality.
So
on
I would-
a large scale.
I would say that if this upsets you, as a group, do something about it. Find a way to collectively get together and use your power, use your knowledge, use your experience to find a way to make it work. Not just sitting on the White House lawn, really coming up with something that's going to change that. So, yes, sir, Jay.
Getting back to what you're showing us here, if I look at mining, that's actually production rather than availability. Meaning, if I look at lithium as resources at the moment, Australia and China and other countries producing it, but that doesn't reflect the availability of the material itself, or does it?
Well,
It's a little bit of both, so you have to have it available in order to go
Yeah.
after it, but even if you only have a little bit available, you'll still extract it if it's easy to extract, and it's something that you you can help your country generate funds from. So there's a heck of a lot more resources in Canada and in Russia than there are anywhere else in the world. But we don't always pull it from there because it's hard to extract.
Okay.
So this isn't just about batteries. Okay? This is also about active pharmaceutical ingredients and just basic pharmaceuticals. So for 97% of antibiotics, there's no US source for the manufacture of those materials. And for antivirals, 92%. We talked about microelectronics, and there are a couple others that we'll talk about in a few more slides here. At the end of the day, this graph on the right, which shows the value add versus production stages, is that we have completely hollowed out the middle value chain where the Germans, Japanese, and US have enhanced where they're at in R&D and in after-sales marketing and services. But the People's Republic of China and Vietnam in particular have really dominated in this middle section. And so this is the result of offshoring, is sending those jobs elsewhere and taking that away from the US. And so that's created this huge imbalance in what we're producing. So these slides that I'm showing you were all developed prior to the Trump election, okay? And so it comes with a certain lens and a certain bias. And in this particular case, we have emissions typing, where from 1990 to 2018, we're showing a continual decline in the sulfur oxide, in the nitrous oxide, in the carbon monoxide emissions standards that one would have to meet. And so, just like in...
You say that we have to meet. These are the standards, or this is the actual levels?
These are standards.
Standards.
Yep, so the EPA issues these standards, and they continue to decrease over time, and that's part of why we are having trouble being able to make this stuff in the United States, and why it's also really expensive if you try to meet these emission standards. Whereas if you send the material over to China, it is the same regulations don't hold. They'll emit into the atmosphere and can do it for a lower price, and then customers here in the United States will buy that material at a lower price, and everybody's happy for the short term, right? But they're not happy in the long term when they're sick with whatever happened from the emissions. And then if we look at the average manufacturing wage, so we have average manufacturing wage, and then we have the actual livable wage. And in China, Brazil, and Thailand, you make more money than you need to live. So you're making 164% or 160% of what you need to actually live. So it's a lucrative job. It's good to have a job as a manufacturing person in those instances. But in the United States, it's inverted from that. Or from Germany, UK, and the United States, it's inverted. And so that's another problem that we need to overcome, is that the wage that we pay to manufacturing workers is also less. And then this is showing some of the volatility in the markets. So for cobalt metal, it hit $90,000 a ton in 2018, and then the bottom fell out in 2020, going down to $30,000 a ton. So you see this super high price, all the investors come in, they start up new mines, they start to build the infrastructure, and then the price drops out, and the mine is just set there to not operate. It just goes into pause mode. And so this has happened twice now, and this is part of the problem of the volatility with the United States, and part of the problem we see now with the tariffs, that everybody's just kind of waiting to see what's going to happen and let things settle out and not make any rash moves. Because if we say that we have this nice runway now to go and stand into businesses because we have a foreign block due to tariffs, and then the tariffs get dropped later, then those businesses will be sunk. So price volatility is a mess.
The bottom drops out. What are the causes? Are people controlling that, making money in the process, or
Yeah. So
does the demand actually change that much?
Oh, no. Demand doesn't change that much at all. So this is price fixing. So the Chinese recognize that someone in the United States is starting up a cobalt mine or a rare earth mine, and they're starting to refine. And so they'll respond by dropping their prices to 1/10 of what they were. Everybody buys up that material that's 1/10. The others can't produce at that level, and so they have to shut down. And this has happened time and time again, especially in the nickel markets. So price fixing is number one reason for why you see this volatility. And the tariffs help to stabilize that a little bit.
I thought this issue of price fixing was supposed to be somehow controlled through the World Trade Organization. So why is that not working? Because obviously United States controls the World Trade Organization, with respect to pricing
Not
of
anymore.
goods.
So we just withdrew. The
Oh,
United
yeah,
States
yeah,
withdrew from the
recently,
WTO.
yeah.
But before that, though, I don't have a good answer as to why So as far as I know, the Chinese said, we'll pay the fine for violating the rules and laws that are part of the WTO, because it's cheaper to do that than it is to allow for these other companies to come in. So that was part, and that's part of why Trump said we're not part of the WTO anymore, because not everybody's playing by the rules. So it was a good idea in theory, but
In practice, it's
everybody
not
has to
working.
actually step up to the plate.
But this is throwing the baby out with the bathwater, because it only gets worse.
Well, we're gonna see here over the next 6 months what's gonna happen. The next year, really.
Yeah.
So let me keep going. Let's get back.
Okay.
Let's get back to that point. That's really the. So we want to be able to onshore upstream capacity, to be competitive in doing this, to be profitable, and to do it without subsidy. That's really what we want to try to do here at the end of the day with the Critical Materials Crossroads. This is an example of how to make a cylindrical battery. So to make this cylindrical battery, it's made up of 3 primary layers: an anode, a cathode, and a separator. And those anodes and cathodes are powder that's made into a slurry and then deposited onto copper foil and aluminum foil. And those copper and aluminum foils then have this separator between them, and they're rolled up into the cylindrical cell. In this particular case, this cathode active material and this anode active material are based on lithium, manganese, iron phosphate, and some form of nanocarbon. It could be a graphite or graphene. And that lithium, manganese, iron phosphate came from lithium carbonate, monoammonium phosphate, iron oxide, and manganese oxide. And so we took purified forms of all of these in order to make the lithium, manganese, iron phosphate, which then got spread onto the copper foil, which then got rolled up into the jelly roll. And somebody has to make this stuff, and that's part of the example of what we're doing. In the Biden era, there was an expectation, a moonshot, that by 2035, all vehicles would be electric. That we would be going to a dealership and you'd no longer be able to buy a gasoline-based automobile. And in that case, we were going to be 600,000 tons per year, so this is kilotons per annum, KTA. 600,000 tons per year in deficiency in the cathode active materials that would be necessary in order to meet that electric vehicle transition. Today, this picture is totally different under the Trump regime, and we're still trying to understand where it's going to go. And just, you know, just for this audience, does Trump make any difference at all in whether you go to the dealership to buy a Tesla or a Prius or an electric vehicle? You know, are you just going to vote with your feet and go do the right thing because you think you want to have an electric car, irregardless of what the gas prices are? You know, let's say that Trump drills like crazy and fuel prices go down to $1.50. You know, are you going to go buy a gasoline car because gas prices are $1.50, or are you going to continue to go with the electric vehicle? And that's something that we need to see as a nation, how we're going to respond to that and how the EU is going to respond to that as well. So the important part of this slide, there's a lot here, but at that time, we were going to need about 1 million tons of material in the US. And the Chinese, so the Chinese are very different from the US. The Chinese already have 48% of their vehicle fleet is electric. Okay, versus 4% in the US. It's tremendous. They have all the charging infrastructure, they have the vehicles, they have the repair stations, the maintenance, everything. It's a great industry. And so they're chewing up cathode active material like crazy.
So why do you think that is?
Because of the subsidies. So the Chinese government just said, we're going to put a lot of money into this. We're going to prioritize artificial intelligence, quantum information, and energy.
Without the carbon pollution.
Yeah. So they know that they screwed up. They know that they got themselves into trouble with the lead and the carbon. And now they've got the money, and they've got a richer middle class where they can start to go into a first world state. So all those crappy jobs are no longer going to be all in China. They're going over to Indonesia and the Philippines, and they're going to go ruin those countries for 20 years while they build up their economy.
You know, Tony, when you live in this country, the United States, you think of the ethical issues, and the decisions are made by people who are supposedly, excuse me, I don't mean any pejoratives. People are supposed to be Christians, you know, and you look at the Christian ethics, you know, it prevents some of these things from happening. I know you can't deal with that because the moral issue is not your area of authority. The people in our Congress, in the Congress, they are all, most of them anyway, are Christians, and they spout Christian ethics, so to say. Then they are there to make all these decisions that affect people or human beings elsewhere as well, and they make them without any qualms whatsoever in terms of the downstream effects of these things, health effects. I mean, I know you may not be able to address that, but what do you think?
It comes back to selfishness. It comes back to those who are elected in those positions, and they just want to continue to be elected in those positions and hold a position of power. And if that means that they have to hurt others outside of our ring in order for those inside the ring to be healthy and powerful, then they'll do it. And there's a few within Congress that are willing to stand up and do the right thing, but there's 90% that are not doing the right thing because they want to do what's best for them. And it's unfortunate that those type of personalities end up in those positions, that we elect people in those positions.
Thank you. I mean, I'm just, you know, as you make your presentation, I just kind of think of these things.
I know, man.
Science.
Hey, that's why I'm doing this. That's part of why I'm doing this work. I'm not out doing defense work. You know, this is the right thing, and we can set an example by doing critical materials work. Yes, sir.
What you're saying is very relevant, and I think again, sort of something that we as an American nation has to deal with. Congress is corrupt. There is no morality there. They are all there to make money. That is their bottom line. You use the word Christianity. That is of no concern. That is not implemented anywhere. What is important instead of the religion is the green buck, the dollar. That is the religion. And one thing that is bad about the way we promote the capitalism is that, you know, making a certain level of profit is all right. If you have a special skill, certainly you should be paid for that. But when the profit goes to the level of greed, then you start getting into problems. That's where we are. Unending problem. This is what my observation has been over the years. In Congress, there are hardly anybody, as Tony mentioned, there are a handful of exceptions who hold some moral and ethical values. Majority of them are there for money. And what happens? They complete their term, and where they end up, they become on the board of the corporations who do all the things. So you scratch my back, I will scratch your back. I'll get the vote for you, I'll pump in money for your election. You get there, you make sure that the rules are that favor us, and we will carry on the cycle. This is what is happening. Think of last 8 or 10 election cycles, except a few, most of them are like that.
So I challenge you to take this and do something. You know, and I'm happy to talk about what that might look like. Okay, so big picture, we're looking to support 100,000 tons per year of material. 100,000 tons of material is 1,000 train car loads worth of finished product that would come out of the critical materials campus here in Kansas City. And it's going to require about $4 billion in capital expenditures, and on the order of actually 3,500 direct jobs and 6,500 indirect jobs in order to be able to meet the capacity to make that 1,000 train car loads worth of material.
And that's just in Missouri.
That's in the Kansas City metropolitan statistical area, so that includes a little bit of Kansas as well. And so an economic analysis report that we had run on this shows that there would be a $17 billion gain in total to the Missouri GDP by 2035 through these activities. And that's accumulated, that's not an absolute number. So you're looking at a little bit less than 1% gain to the Missouri GDP.
And an equivalent type of situation exists in every state in the union?
So an equivalent situation in terms
Of capabilities, possibilities?
Oh, absolutely. Yep. So and really we're getting our butt kicked right now. So Ohio is standing up huge operations with Intel. Arizona is getting the new Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation. They put $60 billion into that about 4 years ago, and they just re-upped it that they're going to put another $100 billion into Phoenix today. Oklahoma is getting a number of plants. Tennessee, Georgia, South Carolina. We're doing very poorly here in Missouri.
Texas.
So the Panasonic plant was a huge win for Kansas in DeSoto, but beyond that, there's really nothing that's happening at a large level. Wichita is probably the next closest for Kansas in terms of economic development. But you look at Nebraska, the Dakotas, nothing's happening there as well. So we have to fight. We have to have a very different policy in the state of Missouri if we're going to attract businesses and provide economic development. just do not have that as a state right now. The expectation is that you pick yourself up by your bootstraps. Yes, sir.
If I'm jumping ahead, it's fine, and I'll just wait until you get there, but I imagine you have made presentations like this to legislators and the curators and people. I'm wondering what kind of feedback you've gotten from them.
So let me, yeah, give me two, I think.
Too early,
just
okay.
Just a couple slides, and then let's come back to that question.
Okay.
I'll tell you, I want to tell you where we're going, based on that feedback. So, I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit here. So this is Wichita, Joplin, Springfield. This little snaky bit here is the viburnum trend. So that's where the Doe Run Company is pulling material out of the ground today. They sell copper, zinc, and lead concentrates out of that region. And in the copper concentrates is where nickel and cobalt are tied up. Just to the northeast of the viburnum trend is the Madison mine. And U.S. Strategic Metals is pulling nickel and cobalt out of there today. And then just to the west of there is the Pea Ridge mine that has heavy rare earths in it. It is a special place. So there are 7 battery manufacturers around the north-south border of Kansas and Missouri, and there's 13 total plants across Kansas and Missouri. So we can see that here, that there's Striking, Panasonic, Eagle Pitcher, Acer, Enersys, Doe Run, Enersys, Sensata, Tab, and Clarios. U.S. Strategic Metals and Doe Run are the 2 that are pulling material out of the ground. And so we have some of the minerals, we have some of the goods in terms of the batteries, but we have no one who's actually taking that material and beneficiating it to make a refined material to go off. So this is the gap that we can fill. And again, this is all pre-Trump. And we're looking at siting operations at the Lake City Army Ammunition Plant or around that area. So Lake City is 19 miles to the northeast of downtown Kansas City, where the STAR is at. It's 4,000 total acres, and it's still the largest small arms ammunition manufacturer in the world, operated by the Holland Winchester Corporation today. So we're looking at specifically 400 acres in the northern section here that would be available for an enhanced use lease to stand up these operations. Now, this might just be part of what we're going to do. There's also agricultural land up here to the north, and the North Point Corporation is developing land off to the west. So we're not sure just yet where this is going to go, and part of that decision is with the real estate developer who's going to stand up these operations. We're just starting to mess around with what the buildings might look like on that 400 acres and how we get to that $4 billion in capex to.
Tony,
Yep.
before you go on, if you say we,
Yep.
who are you talking about?
So the Critical Materials Crossroads as a consortium includes the legislators, educators, the innovators, the investors, the small businesses, entrepreneurs. All these stakeholder groups are part of this Critical Materials Crossroads. And so there's a real estate developer that we consider to be part of the Critical Materials Crossroads, which will own the liabilities of the lease for the land. And then we have another developer who will come in and stand up the buildings based on private equity. And then we have individual businesses that will come in and actually operate their piece of the puzzle within the buildings that are stood up. And here at UMKC, we're acting as the master coordinator of all of these efforts and trying to show which markets are best to go after, which ones to align, and bring all those partners together.
Okay.
That's really what my job has been. So I'm gonna go just a little bit fast to make sure we have time for questions. But one of the most important parts of this operation is the co-location of these assets. So we have innovation that's occurring at the university. We have scaling of operations, which is happening at this location. We have production, which is happening at this location. So innovation, maturation, and production are all happening together. And that's really the secret sauce. There's very few operations in the world that can actually do all three of those. So BASF is one example where they've combined all of that into one operation. And that's it's its own city in Germany, 39,000 people that are all collectively doing the innovation, maturation, and production. Because typically it's just production, or the innovation is just happening at the university and they're disconnected from each other. I want to connect all the pieces together and also provide anything else that's needed. So general support, advanced support in terms of equipment prototyping and maintenance and qualification facilities, also making sure that there's investment capital ready to go and that the workforce has the support that they need. So, okay, so that was all before Trump. Now after Trump, all right, we're gonna stop with this slide. So where I want to go and what I'm trying to get the legislators to agree to is to stand up a set of industrial-based nodes. And that we would have these red dots representing 8 or 10 industrial-based nodes around the United States that are all doing the same operation that we want to stand up in Kansas City. Kansas City would be the first one, it'd be the prototype for how the others would operate. And those refined materials that you get from the red dots would then go out to feed the battery market or the mechanical components market or kinetics production. So we're now expanding this from not just focusing on batteries, but to looking at catalysts and super alloys and batteries and magnets and energetics and ceramics. And I think that by having that agility to be able to feed any one of those markets based on refined materials is where we can be best positioned economically so that if one of those markets goes up or down, you can adjust to that. And that's how we can live within this changing, dancing landscape right now of the new administration and changing tariff levels and changing commodity price levels and changing demand levels. All of those you need to be able to adjust to any one of those. And that's why I think this is the right strategy. And I've been trying to sell this now to the Department of Defense as a starting point to meet their needs in super alloys especially, because this is a dual use market. They need this for military planes and we need it for commercial aircraft. So that's a place where we can start and then build out to some of the others. So let me stop there and just do question period here for the next 5 minutes.
Anthony,
Yes, sir.
I can see there are 100,000 tons a year.
Yep.
My question is very basic. For how long?
Indefinitely. So as long as we can continue to receive material in, we can process that material. And there's plenty of material to bring in. And by having the barge accessibility up the Mississippi and over the Missouri, with the Woods Weather Barge Terminal in downtown Kansas City and the new Missouri River Terminal, we can ship a lot of material here. And we can ship a lot of material out. And then by rail, Kansas City was number 2 in the nation in terms of total tonnage of material. Chicago's number 1 for material passing through the country. So we've got the transportation network, and that's really what makes Kansas City special, is being able to get material in and out, and then have the workforce and the mentality to be able to do manufacturing like this at a high level. And the other secret sauce of this is that it needs to be advanced manufacturing. We can't go back to the old ways of large batch, low pay, manufacturing operations, they need to be continuous flow, they need to be automated, they need to be smart systems that are producing the materials at high purity.
So this kind of center, Kansas City as a paramount center of a new industry, is going to bring more jobs and a better economy.
So we're going to do what we can. You know,
I'll call you.
3,000.
so if we have a 1% impact on the Missouri GDP in 10 years from now, continually having an additional 1% impact, that to me is worth it. Right now, Missouri's GDP is $380 billion. So if we can add to that by 1%, that's worth all of this effort. And if we can grab individuals from the urban core, and we can put them into work in these jobs, that to me is also worth it, and doing the same thing that we were trying to do with urban agriculture, but through a much more lucrative mechanism. It helps everybody. It also helps national security.
In the interest of time, we still need to get the answer for the question about how the legislatures react to your presentation.
Yeah.
So if you will spend a few minutes on that.
So you asked how do the curators and,
Yeah.
the legislators respond to it. And so far I've had positive reaction from the Pentagon, and I've had positive reaction from the senators and the congresspersons within Missouri. So we've met with Senator Schmidt's office, and Senator Hawley's office, and Congressman Alford's office, and Burleson, and Graves. So Graves District oversees the Lake City Army Ammunition Plant. Burleson oversees Acer and Eagle Pitcher down in Joplin. Alford's sitting on appropriations today and is in favor of this type of work. They all see this as checking all the boxes for national security, economic security, jobs in Missouri. So that's what they need to know. And if we can use minerals from the existing Missouri and create a circular economy where we're recycling and using those materials, that's even better. So that's part of the motivation of this. Now, I'll stop there.
What of Kansas?
So Kansas has a number of minerals that might be of use, and we're trying to figure that out now. So Kansas had a law that for every oil and gas well that was drilled, they had to keep cuttings from every one of those well drillings. And so for every 3 feet of the thousands of feet that they drill for the 10,000 wells, they have this little packet of cuttings, and they're all stored in this monster warehouse in Wichita. And so we're trying to get the money to go through and test each one of those cuttings to be able to tell whether there's the mineral resources, especially in South.
Cuttings, you mean pieces of the drill?
It's just
Real
dirt. It's
bits.
just a little packet of dirt that
Okay.
they have, and how much cobalt or nickel or other material is in there, and then is it worth it to go and extract it? And then Senator Moran in particular is also in favor of this work, and his military legislative aide and I are working on this package along with Senator Schmidt's staff today. So the concept is to have a set of defense technology hubs, or defense industrial base hubs, which can then be dual use and create the larger industrial base for the commercial sector.
Do you have any example of these kind of setup operational anywhere in the world, or?
No, we're starting from scratch. As far as I know,
Great.
nobody's done this.
And what time frame we are looking at if everything works together?
So the reconciliation bill that was just is moving forward today in Congress
Oh,
is going to set up small businesses and large businesses for a lot of tax incentives if you want to stand up a factory and produce something in the United States. So there'll be bonus depreciation, and there'll be special incentives for even accelerated depreciation on facilities and buildings. So really trying to stimulate production and growth in the United States. And so you ask, what's the timing? Timing is now if you want to capture those tax benefits. It's not clear that those will be around for very long.
So during your talk, you twice or thrice alluded to you addressing us, you should take up something. You know, when things are not looking bright and right, what exactly you would ask or request our group, as a retiree association, to carry on, to help in this cause? Shall we contact our legislature, get on the email, phone calls, and tell them about what needs to be done, or what exactly we should do? I think we hold a power here, a very small power, and I'm addressing our president here, that we have some clout, and if we can direct it in the right way, I think it might help.
So, if you want to address the curators,
Yeah.
I think that's one thing we can do. My personal belief, and this is only me talking, is that universities should go back to following through with their land grant or civic mission more. Okay, what was established in the Morrill Act in the 1860s is part of what we should go back to. And we should be out in the community. We should be trying to help the community. And this is a way to make that happen. And each of you has an expertise that I don't have that can help figure out how to launch these type of efforts, right? I'm very naive, I'm very junior in being able to stand up something like this. And like you said, nobody's done this, in the world. And I'm a builder, right? I figure out how to do things, and I typically figure out how to do it by beating my head against the wall. So I don't do it very efficiently. And that's where you guys might be able to come in and help figure out a way to do it faster and more efficiently.
Wonderful.
So,
Thank you.
all right.
Any other question, comment, or?
It's a completely different talk than I expected you
Nobody's
present us.
Nobody's going to do this, man. Nobody's going to come in and talk about this, right? They're going to talk about their science.
Yeah, this is very good.
So, but this is what we need to do.
Okay.
Mhm.
So, and I get up every morning, with this mission in mind. I can't go back to doing physics anymore. I really can't. Sorry.
Anthony, I have a very candid question for you.
Yeah.
Forget about that. It's about human condition.
Yeah.
Do you think that China is more advanced because they have so many people and because their average salaries are lower than ours, or they will have some kind of it's another system, it's another regime, okay. But what is really the problem? Why China is so advanced? Because they are more intelligent than us.
So in 1978, Deng Xiaoping created the opening up policy. And that opening up policy was the lead-in to start to offshore capacity. And for that first 20 years, from 1980 to 2000, the Chinese were just trying to figure out how to get their sea legs. They were trying to understand how they could do manufacturing. And we were also helping them along the way. So the U.S.-China Trade Relations Act and Apple and GM and Boeing all sending their concepts over to the Chinese allowed for Huawei and Lenovo to stand up and for other corporations to stand up. And then Walmart and Nike and Dell were sending over jobs for simple things, which allowed for the economy to grow. And then they were sending tens of thousands of students over to the United States to be educated and then return back to the foreign direct investment was large, regulations were low, energy was high and cheap, okay? And the yuan was also devalued. So it was purposely devalued against the dollar so that they could pay a lower tariff relative to what the product was actually worth. And so, so there were a lot of benefits over that period. But then really from 2000 to 2020, they just got really smart, got really good at manufacturing, and they're way ahead of us. So South Korea, Japan, and the Chinese right now, and Taiwan, have exquisite manufacturing
Oriental
capacity.
countries. Oriental countries.
The East
That's
Asian,
why
East Asian countries.
Trump is looking at Orient and not any longer to Europe.
Well, the Germans still have a big hold there too for some of the manufacturing operations, but in terms of advanced manufacturing and really embedding AI into the manufacturing systems, East Asians are way ahead of the United States. We've been asleep at the wheel for a long time. So that's the reality. We allowed it to happen because it was beneficial. It was beneficial economically until you got to a point where there's now this imbalance of control. We just let it go too far. And a lot of people have been screaming about it, but they just weren't listened to for the last 20 years as well.
Actually, in our country, somehow, whether it is the media influence or whatever, we get a very biased view of what is happening in China and Russia. I have lived here for 50 years, and I come from India. And in my personal, I had a chance to attend conference in Moscow and Beijing. And I know that when I was going to, my wife also came with me. Oh, you're going to Russia? Be careful. Same thing about China. Don't do anything that you let, put behind and this and that. And we had a very kind of nervous situation. But I tell you, when we went there, the behavior and the experience was totally different. And Beijing especially. When we went to China, that was in 2019, and we had heard a lot, you all are familiar about the polluted city during the Olympics, how they put a big ring that no vehicle should enter to maintain the right condition of air quality and all that. Beijing, you go there, it's transformed completely. It's one of the greenest cities in the world. And then there was a professor over from their Institute of Environmental Studies or something, research. And the way he taught, I asked him the question, how come you have turned over the air pollution and the quality of air in Beijing area and surrounding neighborhood within 5-7 years? He explained, and that's what he was alluding to, that the government made a decision that we want to bring the air quality up. We want to get rid of the pollution. And they turned over this question to the Scientific Research Institute. You tell us how you are going to, what we should do. And there was intense money, a lot of money, intense research. And they did this study, and of course they found that burning coal from the neighborhood villages was the main cause, and a little bit from industries. So, and then they recommended solution. They said, well, all of the coal firing stoves have to be replaced by gas stoves, natural gas. It was a massive project, billions of dollars were put into it, and within 10 years the whole things were changed. So here is an example of the political will, you see. They had the political will, they pumped in the money, the brains were there in the university, it got done.
It is central planning, though.
Yeah,
Unlike the
central
United-
Command economy.
Central.
There are many bad wives about command and control. We had the experience in our own country. Before EPA came into being in 1970, there was a Department of Health and Human Services equivalent to that. And they were doing things, scientists would do the work.
But
and
before Jacob goes, can we get a quick picture? Can we get a quick picture with everybody?
Yes, we've got another group coming in, and the speaker is kind of poking in because they've got to get their presentation.
Okay.
So we're a little over.
Thank you.
This is a very good